Call the Planning Commission for April 7th, 2025 to order at 7:02 p.m. First item of business is roll call. I'm present. Chair Andre Tessman. Vice Chair Kilcup again indicated that she was unwell and said she would join, so we'll see if she does here later. Commissioner Hurley.
Hello.
All right, thanks for joining us. It's exciting to have you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. Commissioner Lambert, you indicated he did not email or anything like that. I see Commissioner Kilcup has Vice Chair Kilcup has joined us. Thank you, especially given that you're under the weather. Commissioner Maruziak
Present.
and Commissioner Murphy.
Present.
Awesome. So we do have a quorum. We'll give it a little bit longer. We'll see if Commissioner Lambert joins and then potentially come back and do a motion for excusal if he has not. So we'll come back to that as needed. I don't I can't see, but are there any in-person attendees from the public?
Yes, Chair, there are.
Okay. Says public comments will be accepted by in-person attendees for subjects pertinent to the agenda. So I guess let's open it up for public comment at 7:03.
You need to go to the podium. Yeah, please go to the podium and introduce yourself.
Okay, hello, I'm Ashley. I'm the owner of June and Gem Ceramics in downtown Snoqualmie. And basically, I'm here to just make some suggestions about changing the paint color options to bring a little bit more, I guess, like vibrancy and color to downtown Snoqualmie, because I understand that historically, there weren't a lot of paint color options. That totally makes sense. And neutrals were very in and earthy tones. However, I did look into it, and it seems that in around like the 1870s to the 1900s, people were using pastel colors, maybe not the entire house, but they were using it for the trim. And I really think that we would very well benefit from something like that, because it's just, Snoqualmie has so much charm and character to it, but I feel like the color is lacking, and it isn't really representative of what we could be, you know? And I just also, having an art studio, I have a ceramic studio, I feel pretty limited to what I'm able to do to the outside as far as the color goes. And having a art studio that is gray and I guess like cream color, it just doesn't represent us at all in any way whatsoever. So I understand that maybe asking for a full-blown pink pottery studio is a little bit crazy and out there, but I'll take some trim. And I did bring paint swatches because, you know, you girls got to come prepared. Okay, so I went to Benjamin Moore in the historical section because we got to stay historical, right? So I have some options here, and turns out peach was a popular color for trim, and the other popular colors were like rosy colors. There was also yellow. I did bring blues and like a mint green kind of turquoise, even though they weren't nearly as popular. But, you know, I'll take what I can get. But anyway, if I had to choose one, I would say pink. I don't know if I'm making a very good case, but I just really want to bring some more color to downtown Snoqualmie, not just for me, but I also do think that as people start driving through this little town, it's easy to miss all the cute fun stores because there's not anything that's really like popping. It's just easy to miss it. I don't know if I would have noticed if I didn't know it was here. So my point is that if we have some color, it might draw some more tourism in and give my art studio a little something, something. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public in attendance?
No, that's all we
Desiring
have,
comment?
Chair Testman.
Okay, well, awesome. We very much appreciate that perspective, and hearing from the community is always something we appreciate. So thank you. I will go ahead and close the public comment period at 7:07 p.m. So thank you for that. I do want to come back before we move on. I just want to move that that we excuse Commissioner Lambert from this meeting, even though recognizing we didn't get any coordination ahead of time. But can I get a second on that?
Second. Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. Thank you. All right. Okay, I move that we approve the agenda as written for the meeting dated March 17th, 2025. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. And I realized I skipped over the council liaison report, so got a little bit ahead of ourselves, and I'll turn it over to Councilmember Johnson.
He's not present this evening.
Okay, well, there you go. That works out. So it looks like no council. Do we have any written notes or messages by chance?
Negative.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that is minutes complete. Let's go to new business and the climate element presentation and update from Mr. Green, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Chair Testman. And I would like to introduce Chris Green from OTAC. He's going to provide the commissioners with just the latest update on the climate element. Oh, well, oh, we didn't approve the minutes, apparently, Chair Testman. We approved the council agenda and we mentioned the minutes, but I think we need to approve tonight's agenda, which
Oh, you're right.
then, yeah.
Yes. So, okay, forgive me. It's a lot different online versus in person, so I'm suffering from that. Forgive me. All right, so we have approved the minutes dated March 17th, 2025, but we do need to approve the minutes for this evening, April 7th, 2025. So can I get a second to that?
Chair Testman, no, we need to approve the agenda for tonight, April 7th.
Yeah.
And also approve the minutes for March 17th.
Okay. I do we took a vote on the March 17th, did we not?
You're interchanging the words. Agenda and
Okay.
minutes. Yeah, we just need to reverse them.
Okay, all right, so let's start from the top. I
Totally
move that we
against.
approve the agenda for April 7th, 2025 as written. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so the agenda for April 7th is approved. Thank you very much. All right, and then no council liaison report minutes. So the minutes as written, dated for March 17th, 2025. I move that we approve those as written. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? None. All right. Thank you. All right. Thanks for keeping me honest. Okay. And then I will turn it over to you, Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Chair Testman. And again, Chris Green is here tonight. He's going to give the planning commissioners an update on where we're at on our climate element for the comprehensive plan update. So Chris, would you like to start?
Yeah.
All right. Everybody can see the screen, I'm hoping.
Yeah, we can see it. You're in presentation mode, though.
Oh,
Not in presentation mode.
how's that?
There you go.
There we go. All right, so this will be an update on kind of progress since we last met a few weeks back on the climate element that's being developed for the comprehensive plan. And then moving pretty quickly towards developing goals and policies for the Planning Commission to look at and review. But a little more background this evening. So main things I wanted to focus on, just a quick summary of the online survey results since that's closed since the last time that we talked, and then look at the gap analysis, which will kind of help inform those goals and policies. That's where we really start to look at what's in existing plans for Snoqualmie, and then how does that relate to some of the priority hazards that have been identified and we talked about a little bit at the last workshop. So community engagement again, variety of methods. Just kind of reiterate those. So not solely through the survey or the workshops or the Planning Commission, but a lot of different techniques being used. The online survey itself received 27 responses, so you know, pretty typical, I would say, for a online survey. Sometimes there's, you know, more or less, but generally what I'm used to seeing for a community of this size, and you know, kind of a long range topic. Couple of the responses I wanted to highlight out of those, and this one's text is kind of squished together a little bit in the way it was graphed here, but basically which types of impacts are most important for the city to address in terms of climate events. So in this case, flooding, wildfire smoke, extreme heat, were some of the examples given in the question. And then impacts on public health got 10 responses. The highest one was 18 responses for damages to homes, buildings, and infrastructure. The other one that was pretty high, number 17, long-term risks to water supply and other natural resources. So pretty balanced there. People were asked to select up to 3, so they could have picked, you know, up to half of these. And then the other one I wanted to highlight, so to help respond, which of the following resources, and again, they were asked to select up to 3 would be most important to help the community stay resilient. So number 1, critical infrastructure, that came out a little more clearly as number 1 on this one. So things like roads, bridges, utilities, and then parks and natural areas was number 2. Schools and educational facilities, local businesses and economic hubs, and community organizations were some of the other ones that also received some of those votes. And we'll put together a full summary of the results. There was some pretty detailed responses back. You know, at the end, folks were asked to give kind of an open-ended response about what some of their priorities were, and we got a pretty good range of responses on that. I will say it tracked pretty closely with how people voted. So things like you see here, like critical infrastructure and natural areas, and kind of having those as a amenity, but also a resource for resilience. There were a lot of open-ended comments related to those as well. But mainly I want to focus on the gap analysis. So this is that audit of different plans and policies that Snoqualmie's adopted, and kind of how those can advance resilience, or where there's things that have been identified that aren't being addressed. So the last time I presented, we were in the We Are Here was one section back. So we really focused on looking at those priority risks and hazards. We're in this pursuing pathways section now. So looking at how existing goals and policies could be adapted, and developing new goals and policies. I would say we're just barely into this one as we speak now. So we're sort of making that transition from identifying those hazards and kind of looking at what those risks are to actually developing measures. So looking again at the resilience sub-element, there's a list of natural hazards that we've been looking at. One of the requirements for the resilience sub-element is identifying, protecting, and enhancing natural areas, including habitat and species migration areas. So this was actually a question that came up a few times in our in-person engagement events. And I would say in the process, and because we're focusing on city comprehensive plan, it probably looks a lot at the community itself and the built environment and things like that. But that is a key piece of it, is those natural areas, and then identifying and protecting community resilience. So that is where it gets into more of the built form, but also economics and social factors, and kind of having a community that, through both those physical and non-physical things, can is resilient and can bounce back, or kind of adapt to those changes as they happen. And so in terms of what the requirements are, again, just to kind of follow guidance from the state on these elements, sort of a process, and it's deciding which climate hazards should be addressed. So we looked at pairing assets and hazards earlier, looking at risk, exposure, and potential consequences. And this is one that I think came up in our last discussion for something like wildfire, where the risk exposure directly to Snoqualmie, for instance, on that one is relatively low, but the potential consequences are astronomical, versus others that are more consistent things that the city may have to deal with, but maybe less consequences involved. And so kind of trying to balance those different factors. And then that's where deciding the climate hazards that need to be addressed comes in. And so a little bit of an update based on conversations with the Planning Commission and the CPAT, and then looking at survey results and things like that. Sea level rise is now on its own at the bottom. Still pretty safe from impacts of sea level rise in Snoqualmie. But we did move wildfire, and I added smoke, because I know that was something, kind of the two pieces of that. So like wildfire being one that you are seeing more impacts from that, and there is that potential catastrophic impact from it. But then also something like smoke, where it is more distant, potentially, where the actual fire is, but you're seeing it very frequently, and it's kind of a consistent thing to deal with. So I moved that up a little bit. And then, just as a reminder, reduced snowpack was pretty closely tied to drought in the case of Snoqualmie, and what types of issues would be involved in that. And then flooding, of course, important issue, but one that's also being pretty rigorously addressed, you know, by the city prior to doing any climate planning. It's such a such an issue that, as you'll see in the gap analysis, it's pretty solidly covered. And then again, just there's these different sectors to look at, and so this is also useful in terms of looking at like impacts of hazards on different sectors, and if there are goals and policies that address that already or not. And then those existing planning documents that we looked at, really the big one, the 2024 comp plan, but also the sustainability strategy, and then the hazard mitigation plan, which is in the process of being updated through King County. So just a really quick summary of some of the findings of this, looking at existing plans and policies. There are 4 plans, so Shoreline Master Program also part of that. And there's 48 goals and policies that addressed resilience in some way. And as I mentioned, flooding and extreme precipitation is really already pretty strongly embedded in these policies as a hazard that's being looked at, and there's policies and programs that are underway to address that. There's a few policies related to wildfire, and then drought and extreme heat are only mentioned indirectly currently in policies. And then one thing in terms of kind of thinking about the 20-year horizon being looked at in this planning effort and the comp plan in general is those policies don't consider the compounding effect of, you know, facing those things year in, year out. So like the example with smoke, you know, if you have one kind of bad summer with smoke, that's potentially one thing either for health or for the economy and tourism and things like that. But if it's something that's like happening every year, or if you know, there's continuous fire events or things like that, they can get worse over time. And then a lot of the policies support resilience in general, but they don't talk about specific hazards. So that's probably a key next step in terms of developing goals and policies, or adapting some of the goals and policies that the city does have, is looking at really kind of trying to link those to some of those specific hazards that were prioritized, and how they could address those hazards, which helps to make things a little bit more actionable and specific. And then most of those policies are really kind of indirect. So there is things that could achieve some resilience that we saw, but they aren't tied to, say, specific assets or sectors that are going to be used or protected, and they're not tied to specific hazards, and so it makes it a little more difficult to track implementation over time. And so again, this is a really quick overview. We're hoping to come back with some kind of a goal and policy framework that'll follow these, but wanted to kind of let you know what we were seeing and some of the ideas behind that. Just as a matter of kind of the process behind that, there's kind of 2 ways that goals and policies can be developed for this plan. One is sort of, I would say the old-fashioned way, which is a good way, which is just kind of coming up with something that helps address that issue. Commerce does have what they call the menu of measures, and so depending on what hazards are important to your community, what sectors or assets or things you're looking to protect, they have some of these policies that have been, and they're pretty generic, so there's room for customization of these as well, but they're, you know, vetted for effectiveness and being responsive to the you know, the requirements of the new requirements for the climate element, and things like that. So we're working on building from those as a starting point, but then also really trying to get some Snoqualmie specific goals and policies based on knowledge of those assets. So that'll start at the next workshop with more of a framework of the measures that we're looking at, and trying to add something more specific from those with the help of this group and the CPAT.
Chris, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
This is, well, that was perfect timing. This is Mona. So how do you, or maybe we should ask the Planning Commission how they feel about how best to craft the goals and policies? Like, do you want to provide them with a menu of some of the goals and policies that Commerce laid out in their menu of measures? And then maybe also propose some that the CPAT group has, maybe elaborated on, and then we could put that in their packet and give them some things to noodle on before the next meeting, and then kind of narrow down which ones would be the most appropriate.
Yes, that's the plan. And then also, it'll be somewhat narrowed ahead of time, just because there's, I think, 200 of these goals and policies that are in the menu, because some of them are for like different priority hazards, like sea level rise. We can, we're not going to bring those unless somebody's really passionate about having that be what we review. But there's some that are pretty it's pretty easy to sort through a lot of those and say, like, these are some that kind of fit what Snoqualmie is looking at in terms of hazards, or fit the the size of community, or things like that.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah, it is a really long list.
So you'll weed out the ones that aren't really applicable to our city, and then
And
that would
perhaps
give,
prioritize the rest of them so that we're
yes,
addressing the ones that are most urgent up top.
yes.
Yeah.
I'd also be curious how this dovetails with our existing emergency preparedness plans as a city. Obviously, this is focused on climate change. There's potentially a lot of other hazards, volcano erupting, earthquake, those sorts of things. I'm curious how well these plans would dovetail with what we currently have in place with the fire department, police department, that kind of thing. So if we could have some
Yeah.
materials available to us as well, that'd be fantastic,
Mhm.
please.
Good point.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good. Well, I know there's the hazard mitigation plan with the Snoqualmie Annex, but that's still not as community specific as those emergency response plans. So that's a good layer to include.
All right, I want to make sure everyone gets a chance to weigh in here. It sounds like we've got a clear idea of next steps, which will be taking that refined list of proposed actions and getting that incorporated into the packet. We'll review that ahead of time, and that should prompt discussion on refining those further the next time we meet on this topic. But why don't we go do a round robin here and see if anyone else has any questions, thoughts, or comments, whether it be on those next steps or anything else pertaining to the climate element. Vice Chair Kilcup, you have anything?
No questions for me. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Mruzak?
I'm good, thanks.
All right. Commissioner, excuse me. Commissioner Hurley, I passed you. Forgive me.
Nothing additional, thank you.
Okay. And Commissioner Murphy?
No, just eager to see kind of the next steps, and like, I guess, like, really looking to see how actionable we can like take what's already been done and kind of form it and shape it in the right way. So yeah, eager to kind of sink our teeth into that. So, but no additional comments.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Murphy. Yeah, I would just kind of double down on what Commissioner Murphy just said. Going back a couple of slides, you indicated that a gap in the existing documents is, yeah. This results in gaps in priority hazards or sectors and a lack of specificity to track implementation. So I think something we'll be looking forward in whatever's proposed at the next meeting would be like, okay, what will be the mechanism for tracking for the city of Snoqualmie when it comes to whatever items we approve in this element or recommend for approval in this element.
Yeah, yeah.
Chris, do you have a timeline in mind for when you might have that information readily available for the commissioners to take a first glance at? Would that be at the next meeting or early May?
It would be at the next meeting.
Okay, perfect. We'll look forward to that for April 21st.
Yeah, we're
Awesome.
looking forward to it as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so that concludes climate element presentation and update. So let us move now to the municipal code 17.35 historic overlay, color palette presentation and discussion.
Thank you, Chair Testman. I'd like to take this opportunity tonight to introduce you to Andrew Love. Andrew is working for us as a contract planner right now. He comes to us from AHBL. I had the pleasure of working with Andrew before when I was in Black Diamond. I know his work. He does great work. And so I'm really excited to have him here to dive into the historic color palette design review board issues. So Andrew, would you like to start your presentation?
Yes, thank you, Mona. This has been a really fun project to get to start, since I've been with Snoqualmie. Let me share my screen. All right, it looks like the screen is being shared correctly. So we're going to be doing, I'll be doing a brief presentation on historic color palette options, and hopefully we can kind of have a discussion with the planning commissioners on what options they would like to see in Snoqualmie, and then we would be coming back to you in the future with potential draft code amendments. So just as a background, I wanted to, in case anybody was unfamiliar, I just wanted to zoom in on the zoning map and point out what areas of town we're actually talking about here. So in case you may not be familiar with this, there are two different historic district overlay zones which apply additional regulations on top of whatever the underlying zoning is. In this case, it's to implement different color palettes and making sure that there's historic preservation of the different parts of town with a lot of character or older buildings. There is the Meadowbrook Historic District Overlay Zone to the right there you see outlined in black, and the downtown is to the left. It's a little hard to decipher, but there's also another downtown historic commercial landmark district, which is separate. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around the differences, but just wanted to at least visualize what areas of town we're talking about here. And next, I thought it would be, and actually Mona wanted me to do this, take some pictures. I focused mainly on the downtown area, and I didn't mean to organize it this way, but they kind of get a little colorful as the slides progress. So here we see the main downtown strip, drawing a blank, railroad. And you can see that there's a lot of beige and gray, but there are little pops of color. There's some yellow trim on the upper right-hand corner, and then not so much building color-wise, but there's some cool colored green patio furniture on the lower left. And then, of course, there's some murals scattered around town. This one is of honoring the historic significance of this being an old logging community. And then next we go a block, I guess it would be northeast maybe. So there are some colors here that you would see not on the current adopted color palette, but we are seeing some more reds. And then of course, any kind of color of brick or stone would be allowed. And then we have a building that is mostly white and black. And then lastly, I think we have, this is subjective, but I think we have some good examples of ways of using color that may not exactly be to the current standards, but kind of add a little bit of life to the downtown streetscape. In the lower right-hand corner, you can see how the natural color of the brick complements really well with the kind of muted green trim. And likewise, the hardware store, that is not an approved base color, but they do a really nice job with choosing a lighter green color with a darker green trim, and then the white accent color, for example. So now that we've done a brief background on kind of the area of town where this applies to and some examples of what currently exists, this is just a brief background. So Snoqualmie Municipal Code Chapter 1735 does require historical design review on some applications. Type 1 permit is required to change exterior paint color within the historic overlay areas. However, if a proponent wants to vary from the approved color palette, they would need a variance. Now, there are some pros and cons, and if you'd like a fuller list, you could refer to the staff memo that's in the packet. But basically, some of the pros that could be considered when thinking about either keeping or only slightly altering the current regulations would be that it can preserve historical integrity, it can increase property values. There is the sense of having an aesthetic appeal, depending on, the colors chosen. And then there is the protection from inappropriate alterations. You may not want to see like a Barbie pink house right next to like an all black house, for example. And then the cons, there is limited creative freedom. It could lead, if every building is gray or beige, it could lead to a monotonous streetscape where there's not so much different colors from street front or building front to building front. There is the potential increase in cost. I say potential because you could argue that the business owners don't necessarily have to stray away from the color palette, but it definitely is an increase in cost if they would like to do so. And also the time, it increases the amount of time that they would need in order to paint their building. And then lastly, there are some enforcement challenges. It's kind of hard to know exactly what shade of color and whether it meets the code or whatnot. So Planning Commission had some good questions for Mona a couple months ago in the February meeting. So we have done some research on some other cities, and added to this list is actually Snoqualmie City. So we researched some different cities that have historical downtowns. All but one are in Western Washington. So I'll go ahead and get started. Generally, though, interestingly enough, what we did find is that Snoqualmie has the strictest color palette regulations out of any of the cities researched, which could be something important to note. So I'll try to run through these as quickly as I can while still hitting on the highlights. So for Burien, they don't have a particular palette of colors that they require. Their approach is that the storefront's palette should be no more than 3 colors. So it would be 1 base, 1 trim, and 1 accent. Now they encourage the trim and accent colors to contrast with the base color. Or for example, a darker base color with a lighter trim, whether it's white or a lighter version of the base color, or the opposite. And there's a couple examples in their code that you can see here. And they also have additional restrictions on materials. For example, no painted brick. I think the old kind of brick look can be really cool for historical identity purposes. But also importantly, I do know that sometimes painting old brick is actually not good for the integrity of the brick material itself, because it can't breathe, basically. Next, Carnation. So they actually have this chart in their code. They say that, you know, these are examples of colors that can be used. They do have a preference for earth tones, neutrals, grays, blues, red hues, and dark saturated colors are okay. However, the bright colors are only allowed as trim or accent. So this could be another option if this city of Snoqualmie would be interested in updating their regulations. Gig Harbor, on the other hand, they do have similar standards as the previous couple cities, except the brighter colors are only limited to finer architectural details, so basically accent colors. You wouldn't be able to use it for trim or the main color. And they also have, they suggest avoiding painting brick. Kirkland's standards are not written into the code. They're design guidelines for certain parts of their town. So they have just generally no specific colors that are required, but they do go into detail about using natural colors. For example, you know, earth tones, subdued colors such as barn red and blue gray for building walls and large surfaces, reserving bright colors for trim or accents, and avoiding garish and light colors that may show dirt, and considering the color of neighboring buildings when selecting colors for new buildings. Boarding is pretty interesting. So they use colors that are harmonious with adjacent buildings and characteristics of colors used in the early 1900s. The reproduction of these colors on this page is approximate, and they say to refer to the approved City of Ording color palette. And this was what I was able to find. It may not be the exact one that is in their office, but you can see that there's actually quite a variety of colors here. And they reference some of those historic kind of color schemes from Sherwin-Williams and Kelly Moore, which is now out of business, but I'm sure there's other brands too. A couple more here. So Port Townsend is similar to Ording, as they have an actual palette that you need to come in and show your paint swath. They actually have a pretty thick historic preservation standards manual. Their downtown district is on the National Register, so that's pretty interesting. Building colors are required to conform to this palette. This is the best resolution image I could find, so I apologize, but we can certainly explore different options if this is kind of the approach Snoqualmie would perhaps entertain. Couple more here. So Walla Walla, this is the only city in Eastern Washington, but they have some more detailed regulations on materials rather than color. They have similar standards as the other cities that don't necessarily regulate particular colors. They, you know, emphasize traditional light, muted colors, pastels, earth tones are generally acceptable. I think calling out natural wood tones could be something to consider. Because, you know, Snoqualmie is a historic logging town, so kind of making sure that people understand that untreated wood is also okay could be interesting. They do say that sun bright colors are allowed, but need to be used as trim colors, and they do not allow fluorescent or day glow colors or neon. And then lastly, Snohomish was another city that we wanted to look at. So interestingly enough, they do have pre-approved paint colors, but actually it's more for signs rather than the buildings. And there are 63 different pre-approved colors for signs by the design review board. And then there's actually a table that includes the paint company color codes. So applicant could go to either Sherwin-Williams, Behr, or Benjamin Moore and know exactly what color to get. And they also, it's accompanied by digital color codes. Now, I'm not really sure how much work would be involved in trying to recreate this, but it was at least a unique kind of example of what another city's doing. The exterior building paint, however, does not really require review or approval unless such paint is used for signage, like I just said. So that was a kind of an interesting one. So I know I just kind of went over quite a few different options, and just to open it up for discussion by with the planning commissioners, are you feeling one way or the other when it comes to the city of Snoqualmie? Do you feel like it still could be worthwhile having a more stricter color palette, for example, like Ording or Port Townsend, or could it potentially be better to have a more open-ended process like the other cities, where it's more darker tones or earth tones, but you don't necessarily need to comply with the X number of paint color examples?
Yeah, let's do a quick round robin and then maybe devolve into something more open or freewheeling, but Vice Chair Kilcup, start with you.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was interesting how different all of those are. I think if my memory serves from what we just looked at, I liked both the approach of Ording as well as Burien. I liked the overall palette that Ording had together. It seemed like it was kind of in those more neutral, earthy to pastel. And then I also thought it was interesting how I believe it was Burien had more of a structural, like darker colors with lighter trim. That could become really cool if it's like, hey, keep it in a earthy neutral, and then the trim we ask to keep, maybe similar, like a white or something, and then doors or accents could be what they choose. So those were the two examples and structures that I thought were interesting. I mean, there's two parts of this for me. One is I don't want to stifle creativity for small business owners. The other thing is, if everyone's trying to bring the pizzazz, it can get really loud really fast. And so, from my background in commercial real estate, this is something that comes up. Often, what we look to do is have a general consistent aesthetic and then let them try to show their creativity through their signage. And so that's just another thing I wanted to offer here. But those are my comments.
Thanks, Vice Chair Kilcup. Commissioner Hurley.
And I apologize, I don't have the historical background on this. What is it that brought this to the attention of the commission in the first place? Was it specific businesses or citizens that were asking for us to revise the code? Is that where this came from?
Yes, we've had several businesses reach out to us and ask to paint their buildings or their use accent colors to kind of make their businesses stand out. We also had a roundtable discussion at the Economic Development Commission meeting. Well, we've had, I think, 2 or 3 of them. I was only present at one, but where this issue has come up, where the businesses have asked us to look at the colors.
Yeah.
Can I add?
And let's let Nicole weigh in here too.
Hi, I'm Nicole Weeby, Community Liaison. So I work really closely with a lot of the businesses in Snoqualmie. Few things have happened in the last several months is we've had some new businesses opening up in Snoqualmie. Some are currently in the construction phase because of the fire and moving around. We had one business that went through a variance process, which was costly for her as a small business owner. If she'd have had more variety, more things to choose from, it wouldn't have been as costly. So these are the few things that kind of triggered this conversation. This has always been like a low chatter, I would say, the last several years. But in the last year or so, that chatter has risen to a strong conversation. And like Mona said, the outreach that we've had with the businesses, we heard it pretty loud and clear. It was something that we were moving towards as staff. And so what we heard publicly in the roundtable kind of reinforced what we were working kind of on behind the scenes.
Thank you very much for that. So it sounds like we're looking to increase the flexibility for local businesses while still maintaining the aesthetic of the historical sort of palette and the look of the town that we've enjoyed and that has been, something that's existed for quite some time. So my recommendation would be something along the lines of what we're seeing in this that Carnation has done, where they've said, here's several different kinds of palettes that you could choose from. Here's where you take it that's a little too far. If we're looking at neon colors, if we're looking at very bright colors, that these ones are probably not in the aesthetic of where we're going. And so we sort of give both ends of the spectrum as far as this is something that is a little bit more flexible, that is still within the aesthetic that we're going for, and then that also to provide the sort of antithesis of that this color, this particular type of aesthetic is a bit too far, and that's not what we want to see from local businesses. That would be my recommendation.
Chair,
Very
can I add
good.
something?
Yeah, please.
Councilmember Joe Johnson. And correct me if I'm wrong, staff, but I believe that in our code, it isn't just that there's a small set of colors, but I think it's that they have to pick a suite of colors.
That's correct.
Yeah.
If
So it's
there's-
even more
yes.
specific than just picking from, choose 3 from this huge set. It's this set or this set or this set.
Yeah,
Yes.
you couldn't
Yeah.
take facade from A and do trim from D. You
Right.
have to stay, and that's been very limiting for the businesses.
And I believe, sir, you were saying that this is one of the most limiting ones that you saw in your research.
Yes. Yeah. And just to add to that, I apologize for not mentioning that. So there are only really three options for businesses. This is the main color I want. It's either tan, beige, or off beige, and then you have to choose the corresponding accent and trim color to go along with that. If you want the teal accent color, but you like the first main building color, you would technically still have to go through the variance process. The only other way you can mix and match is if you look at the color palette, which is also in the packet, just in case anybody's curious, I think the 4th page, there's additional colors which you can mix and match, but it's only for the trim, I believe, that you can mix and match.
Windows.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And we
Uh,
don't have to answer all these questions. I just thought it'd be good to have some things to talk about in case people wanted to discuss it further. But yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hurley, did you have any other thoughts?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Muzak?
Oh, yeah, I'd actually like to second what Commissioner Hurley had mentioned. I think Carnation has a pretty intriguing thing, and they do allow the bright colors, but basically in the trim. And so if you look at it, they're saying, don't go too crazy, don't make a completely yellow house or something like that. But if you want something to pop, that's really seemed to give some additional leeway. And I actually think that might be a good compromise to retain a general look, but also give the business owners some way to use some pop. Or really open up the trim. And I think that's what the request was anyway. So that's my comment on that.
So at least a couple different planning commissioners kind of like the option I have on the screen again. It doesn't mean that we would have to do exactly what's shown, but perhaps, pastels could be allowed as the trim color, but neon colors wouldn't be allowed in either case. Whereas Carnation allows any kind of bright color as a trim color.
Vice Chair Cook, do you want to weigh in?
Yes, I would be horrified if those colors were on a building. So I'd just like to go on record there. I do like the idea of giving a little bit more flexibility. Or I did not realize, and so I'm really glad that that question was raised about what the current business owners have to deal with in terms of it being like a very prescriptive grouping. Um, I would definitely like to see more flexibility for them, but my preference would not be what we're looking at now, that lowest group of bright colors be on buildings.
Yeah, I second you on that, Mr.
Okay,
Coco. Yeah,
that's it. Thank you.
yeah. Commissioner Muzak, did you have anything else?
Oh, no, I'm good, thanks.
All right, Commissioner Murphy?
Yeah, I really liked first of all, this is a great presentation. I thought this really brought to life, really was exactly what we were looking for in terms of just like what other municipalities are doing, and seeing it for ourselves. And it was this was the level of detail, here I think was fantastic. So I think we have a really good sense of how we stack up with some of these municipalities, how restrictive we are, how much we're really tying the hands of small business owners to be able to like thrive in a really challenging retail environment, right? Like it's tough out there. And I think we need to like swing the pendulum further towards flexibility so that our small business owners can have every edge they can muster up to survive right now. So I, whether I'm not gonna quibble with like the certain colors right yet. And I think like um, there's certainly more bright colors we can incorporate. Does it have to be these we see on the screen? Like probably not. But I think certainly like expanding the menu of options and being less prescriptive in terms of just the different like options that we're giving small business owners, I'm all for. Um, I was also pretty surprised to hear some of the feedback in the memo that that the King County Historic Preservation um, staff had given our staff in terms of just like mandating of a specific colors being not appropriate. I thought that was interesting to hear that. I don't know all the background there. And it certainly like underscores that we are the most restrictive, and it shows, right, by just taking a walk down some of our downtown streets. So I'm excited that we're able to tackle this, and I hope that we can continue to solicit and get great feedback from business owners. I'm really glad that you were able to come tonight, and I think like that's really where this comes about. So, um, we'll certainly have debate and discussion around like what colors and what's going to pop and what's too much. But I think that's a good discussion to have, and it takes us like to a better place. It'll take us to a better place than currently what we have. And we're doing it by like looking at how we stack up with other municipalities. So, really like kudos to staff for pulling this great presentation together.
Chair, it's Nicole Weeby here. I'm wondering if I could just kind of tag on to what you were saying. Yes, I'm here as staff, but I feel I'm also here representing some of the business community that's not here. And I think it's worth noting some of the things that we've heard in the roundtables, piggybacking on what you just said. It's been a very difficult year and a half for our businesses, our small business owners. And so we heard that loud and clear. So what are some of the things that we can do as a city to help them? One of them is signage. We're working on that through wayfinding throughout the community. We're also working with WashDOT to try to get some signage on WashDOT. That's one of their concerns. Another one of their concerns was this color palette. So having this discussion is very valuable. One of the other things that we are working with them on is the directory on the boardwalk, trying to put some things inside that kiosk. So I just want to reiterate that this is really important to them, and they're struggling, and the struggle is real, and it's a big elephant, and how do we chew on that elephant? But if we can just chew on each of these things, if it makes a difference, it can make a big difference to some of these small business owners. So thank
And I
you.
think one thing to add in terms of just like the increasing flexibility, it reduces the cost for the small business owner to then have to take the variance request and bring it here, and then they have to kind of spend money on a designer or consultant or whatever that might be, right? And I think like we're doing our part here to kind of give them more options so that they don't necessarily, that maybe comes up much more rarely than it currently does.
Correct.
No, that's good. That's great. Anything, any other thoughts, Commissioner
No, that's
Murphy?
it, Chair. That's great. That's it.
Okay. A couple of thoughts I had. One, I definitely echo your support of staff for the work on this presentation. It's definitely helpful. Two, I'll second again Vice Chair Kilcutt's thought on those bright colors. Definitely. That's a little scary. One question I had is when we look at Port Townsend, right? That seems to be the most analogous city frankly, to Snoqualmie. And I say that because they've taken the approach that they have because they have a national landmark historic district, which is our same designation. Am I incorrect in that?
We have national, sorry, I got really loud. We have, the city has properties that are on the National Register, and the district is, we have our own kind of set standards for the district, and then I believe there's a King County landmark district of some sort, but technically the downtown district of it in itself is not on the National Register, just individual properties. But it is similar in that regard that there are numerous buildings that are on the register, whether that's the National Register or the state register, or I believe the King County and the state properties are basically one and the same, but
Gotcha. Okay, so we have landmark buildings that are, and so I'm assuming as part of those, as part of that designation, then, there are fairly strict color requirements associated with that, right? And so I guess by extension, to keep consistency across downtown, they should essentially be driven, the palette should, for the most part, be driven by the palette that's required of those buildings on the register. Is that accurate, or?
that's a really great question, and I apologize I did not address that in the presentation. So actually, it's more of an honorary designation. Certainly, if we're reviewing a project and there are there is proposed to be redevelopment, we could look at mitigation measures into protecting, historic properties and whatnot, but there's no actual set guidance by the state or by the federal government as to like what you can or cannot do or paint a building that's on the National Register. It's actually more up to the city. So, to kind of have, if Snoqualmie wanted to kind of have its own unique identity, they could look into kind of looking at what some of these other cities are doing and kind of pick and choose what colors they like. Or another option would be to just kind of have a more general kind of preferred palette where you can choose earth colors or dark saturated colors, but we're not necessarily going to like list the exact paint color and brand that you have to choose. So
Gotcha.
those would be the main two options, just based on what I'm hearing from the Planning Commission so far.
Yeah. Okay, that's really helpful. I appreciate that. Some other thoughts that I had. One, I think we're all familiar with kind of like if you had to say what are the colors of Pacific Northwest architecture in general, right? We're going to say cedar, black and white, right? Would be certainly contemporary Pacific Northwest architecture. And so, and that looks great. Love it. I'm attracted to it, right? But I think certainly something we want to avoid that we see, for example, in a place like Kirkland, right? You see more a larger collection of buildings that have that color palette. And so I'd say like a goal would be if we do make changes, if we do liberalize the palette, we want to avoid kind of the monotony that comes with stereotypical Pacific Northwest color palette. So I'd throw that out there. Another thought I had based off of the discussion is I feel like we could deliver on flexibility for the business owners if we made no other change except getting rid of the current construct of the 4 options. If we said, you know, our guidance on the base color and trim and windows is this, and all of the colors contained in options 1 through 4 reflecting that guidance are approved. I think that in and of itself would be a tremendous amount of flexibility for the businesses while keeping, you know, the historical consistency or whatever. So I would throw that out there. I think the construction of Carnation, the way they just kind of provide that guidance is good. My only concern there, and I definitely defer to like Vice Chair Kilcup in her experience, is when we don't take the time to specify colors, right? I feel like too much latitude can quickly devolve. And so my concern with the approach taken by Carnation is just that I get it, you know, they say grays and neutrals and all that, but it's always in the eye of the beholder. And if we're already talking about weak enforcement capability, I feel like it would be even weaker under that construct. So I personally would be, even though it is as a user of city regulations, like that would be accessible. I do worry about taking the approach of Carnation. And so I would probably, I don't remember, I think maybe it was Commissioner Maruziak complemented Ording's approach. That might be kind of the sweet spot, right? We've got a pretty extensive list of colors. We have not taken the approach, the existing approach of Snoqualmie in terms of like limiting them to just a certain number of combinations. And it's still specific enough that we're avoiding misunderstandings between intent and execution. So that would be my thoughts on that. I don't know if anyone, yeah, Vice Chair Kilcup.
One thing I remember from the earlier part of this discussion, I think coming to us, was our color palette is also dictating a brand. And so that was another piece that we had talked about, was moving it more into a Pantone of the general color we're looking for, and not dictating a brand for the business owner. So I just wanted to kind of resurface that as something I think would be helpful. And I also just would like to agree with everything you just said. I like this Ording palette in general. And then what you said prior to that, which is just giving flexibility within that. I mean, these are very, you know, I can't see this getting too wild from this color palette or something similar.
Yeah, thanks, Vice Chair Kilcup. And you know, to build off of that feedback that we got as we opened for public comments, you know, we have, looks like in the second row, you know, I don't want to dwell on pink or whatever, right? But there is a lighter shade there. And again, or you know, I don't know how many, if you counted how many colors Ording has, let's see, 6 times 4, 6 times 4, and then some extra ones. You know, that's a lot. And if we could align on, you know, 75 colors or whatever, maybe that's a, you know, it's a pretty wide palette. And if we get away from that model where we're dictating a specific scheme. So yeah, I guess, oh, Vice Chair Cook, yeah.
Sorry. Another question I had was just, I'm not really clear on what is the process for the business owners to go through for notifying of us of which colors they choose, and or if they have a suggestion or question, like how onerous we make that process for them, and who has the ability to just say yes or no. So that's a question I have as well in terms of just making it easier on the business owners.
I can try to take this question. If the business owners are using the 4 selections, they can just move forward. If they want to intermingle these or do something different, then it becomes a variance process. And the best example that of late that I can give you guys, and hopefully you've driven through town, you can visualize it, is the Carousel Candy Store. So that became a process, and I think I can speak on that business owner's behalf. It was an expensive process. It was $750. Now, I will say, part of that was some of the staffing challenges that we had within the department. And so that work had to be contracted out. And those fees, the attempt was for those fees to be, we weren't able to do it in-house. The city is also working on their fee schedule for fees in general. So not to say that there would never be fees, when you want to do some sort of a variance, but we kind of found ourselves in this situation where we had no choice, but that was expensive for that business owner. Now, had she had more liberties with, say, the ording, maybe that wouldn't have been quite that. Although, let me backtrack that a bit. She was definitely going for a Neapolitan, a pink, a brown, and a beige. So not sure what the ordering was. So she might have found herself in a variant situation anyhow. But that process, it can take time. It can take, I don't know, what would you say, Mona? 4 to 6 weeks, depending on when someone gets it in, when we get the information to you guys, when we get it on the agenda. So it could hold things up for a business owner. So it's not only the expense, it's the time. So to give them more opportunities to work within that will allow them to do their work more freely. And I think will free up staff time, and it will also free up your time not having to review, the different paint requests.
I think we could probably make that an administrative review. So if they come in for their building permit to do like a tenant improvement, they could show their colors at that time. And as long as they met the colors on the color palette and they were harmonious with surrounding buildings, that could be something that could be an administrative approval without needing to go through a design review variance, which would help make that process easier and less expensive for the business owner.
Chair, can I jump in with Chair, can I jump in with a quick question?
Please.
Question for staff. So there's some municipalities that aren't listing out colors, and I'm looking at Gig Harbor as an example. It looks like they have just like general guidelines in terms of like avoiding bold colors and bright trim colors, limiting bright colors to finer architectural details, things along those lines. I guess like the question I have on those is like how is that like interpreted in terms of just like someone's definition of bright versus not bright? How is that enforced? I guess like I'm trying to better understand how the municipalities that don't list the colors are able to keep to a certain aesthetic versus those that do. And just, I know it's a different approach, but like as you went and looked at the code and some of the guidelines, just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks for your question. I unfortunately don't have a great answer, but certainly would be curious to know how, the different city staff enforces that. I can certainly reach out, and I'm sure at least one of them would be happy to share their experience with it. I think it probably comes down to subjective interpretation as to whether this brick red color is, saturated enough or what have you, but.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have to go crazy with any of that outreach, but just like some, like maybe one anecdotal example of how that's done, because I think any palette color will have limitations, right? We'll never be able to satisfy every business owner. There's always going to be some creativity that's going to be outside the bounds of any color palette, even if we obviously expand the limited options that we have. So I love to like get a sense as to, as we're like thinking about this, how